only way Democrats can pass their extreme radical socialist agenda, lie to you about it. You know, the COVID bill wasn't about emergency COVID relief. Infrastructure bill wasn't about what they said infrastructure, or everything is now being defined as infrastructure. Their false claims about the Georgia election law were nothing more than an attempt to smear Republicans, bully spineless corporate cowards to go along with their lies. Senator Ted Cruz is standing strong, moving ahead with a bill with Senator Josh Hawley to hold Major League Baseball accountable by moving it to increase its antitrust scrutiny after the league pulled the All-Star game from Georgia, moved it to Colorado. Ironically, Georgia's new law is far more inclusive than what they have in Colorado or Delaware or New York. And with reaction, Senator Cruz, Senator, I'd be negligent if I didn't ask you about what's unfolding in Minnesota tonight again. And now they have a mayor talking about taking away non-lethal alternatives for police.
Well, obviously what's unfolding in Minnesota is horrific, and the violence that we're seeing has a potential to spill out and get out of control. It began with what now appears to be a tragic accident, and an accident where a man's life was taken through a mistake. Unfortunately, in the course of interactions with law enforcement, sometimes there are accidents that occur, but this is a situation where the racial powder keg that we see the left willing to light the fire of and incite violence, incite murders that we saw all across the country, murders of police officers, fires and burning of stores is wrong, and it's horrific. The shooting needs to be fully investigated. It needs to be gotten to the bottom of why that happened. But the answer is not engaging in violent riots, and there are a whole lot of Democratic politicians who celebrate and encourage this kind of lawlessness and resort to violence, and it has become a central part of the Democratic Party.
You know, I want to go to the Georgia election law for this reason. I mean, the president now has called it Jim Crow 2.0 twice. He's been in politics over 50 years. Georgia's election laws, as the reforms go in place, are much more accessible to everybody in Georgia than the very rigid laws which we've gone over in deep detail, for example, in Joe's state of Delaware. Now, if he's going to claim Jim Crow 2.0 in Georgia, why didn't he lift a finger in Delaware, and why was he partnering with the former Klansmen to stop the integration of public schools, because he didn't want them to become racial jungles, as he said?
Yeah. Look, you're exactly right. Joe Biden, unfortunately, has a long history of engaging in race baiting and inciting racial conflict and divisions. In a prior election cycle, he went before the NAACP and he said, they're going to put you back in chains, which is incendiary. It's a grotesque lie when he accuses anything he dislikes of being the new Jim Crow. Somehow Joe Biden never seems to acknowledge that Jim Crow laws were written by Democrats. The Dixiecrats were Democrats. Bull Connor was a Democrat. The founders of the Ku Klux Klan were Democrats. And you don't have to go back 100 years to find that. Joe Biden, a decade ago, gave the eulogy for a grand cyclops of the Ku Klux Klan, Robert Byrd, the majority leader of the Democratic Party. Joe Biden a decade ago was willing to celebrate his life, an avowed Klansman. And so the history of racial bigotry on the Democratic side is horrific. And now the Democratic Party, whenever they have a political fight, they immediately try to inflame racial division. So with the voting law in Georgia, the voting law in Georgia is designed to protect the right to vote, to protect the integrity of the right to vote. And Joe Biden and Democrats are lying about it, and they know they're lying about it, but they also know the compliant press. You know, I watched the piece you just did with James O'Keefe on CNN. CNN's not going to cover the truth. They're going to repeat the lies because that's what propaganda outlets do. But, you know, it was amazing. Joe Biden's lies were so bad that the Washington Post, no right-wing organization, they are usually a reliable left-wing mouthpiece. The Washington Post fact-checked Joe Biden on the Georgia election law and gave him 4 Pinocchios, said he was flat-out lying, and yet it doesn't stop the Democrats from repeating those lies over and over again.
Let me go back to, and what they really don't want is voter ID. What they really don't want is signature verification. But you need an ID for to buy a six-pack, for crying out loud, or to get in the Capitol or get in the White House. I want to go back to this violence. And all throughout the summer, neither the media mob nor the Democratic Party would even call riots for what they are. And there were riots, and 3,000 police officers were hurt, and bricks and bottles and rocks and Molotov cocktails and other injuries. We had, 30 people killed over the summer. They shouldn't stop. We're not going to stop. And beware on all levels that this is going to continue. I don't hear enough outrage from Democrats now. I thought they were against, quote, insurrections.
There's none whatsoever. Rashid Tlaib, the radical leftist Democratic congresswoman, said in response to what happened in Minnesota, we need to end policing. So they're not even hiding. Their agenda is abolish the police. And by the way, if they succeed in doing that, the people who will be hurt the most are low-income Americans. Many of them are African-American. Many of them are Hispanic. They're the ones that are often the victims of murder, the victims of violence. But the Democrats are willing to do this to get power. Look, for example, we were just talking about the Georgia voting law. When Major League Baseball decided to hypocritically behave like the woke enforcers for the Democratic Party, they yanked the All-Star game out of Atlanta. They moved it to Denver. Atlanta is 51% African-American. Denver is 9% African-American. Sean explained to me how a racial social justice warrior takes $100 million out of Atlanta, hammers the state of Georgia to move to a state, Colorado, where they have 2 fewer days of early voting than they do in Georgia. This is pure politics, and they don't care about all the African-American small businesses, all the African-American workers in Atlanta that they hurt through their political gesture.
All right, Senator Cruz, we thank you for being with us.